Hello and welcome back to Radio 2. So we're officially starting with a new chapter today, as well as a new module, Module 2.10, and this is about storytelling. So storytelling is the crux of being a great radio presenter. So that's literally what will define you from being a mediocre presenter to being a great presenter, okay? Storytelling is something that's not purely used on simply the radio or the TV. It's something that is used in pretty much everything that we do in our day-to-day lives. Think about when you tell your friend about something that happened, that's storytelling. So if you think that you're naturally not the greatest storyteller, never fear. The great thing about storytelling is it's something that you can get better at. It's something that has a lot of tips that we can teach you in order for you to become a better storyteller. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next 3 lessons, okay? So we're taking in the next 3 classes with the aim of making you a better storyteller. And today we're using Next Level Radio. So if you want to follow along with what we'll be looking at today, it's from page 160 up until page 164 for today's lesson. But before we get into it, I want to show you storytellers, Paul Harvey. So we're just going to listen to one of his stories, and he would finish each episode with his signature, "Now you know the rest of the story."
Now, the rest of the story. Remember these 4 words: Al was utterly useless. Al was utterly useless. "I'm nothing but a burden on my family," he once told his sister in a letter. "Really, it would have been better if I had never been born." Al had hit bottom by the age of 22. His parents, impoverished, were no longer able to support him. He needed a job, but nobody would hire him. In desperation, Al appealed to an old school friend, a fellow whose class notes he used to copy. The friend's father had government connections, and a few days later, Al was being interviewed for a position at the Federal Patent Office. Fred Haller was then director of the agency. He would conduct the interview personally. Haller informed the young man that he needed personnel capable of judging whether a request for a patent had any justification. "What do you know about patents?" the director asked, and Al replied, "Nothing. Nothing at all." The director blinked a couple of times. Ordinarily, he would have terminated the interview then and there, and yet there was something intriguing in the young man's frankness. "Tell me a bit about yourself," the director asked, and Al forced a smile. What was there to tell? He'd been thrown out of high school at 15. With no high school diploma, college was out of the question. So he applied at a technical school, but then he flunked his first entrance exam. So he went back to high school, a different high school, actually because his old high school refused to readmit him. Now this time he graduated. He was even accepted thereafter at technical school. But when prospective employers subsequently discovered that he had cut classes chronically and that he had passed exams only narrowly and had treated professors irreverently, well, nobody would hire him. Nobody would hire him. And now here he was in the Federal Patent Office asking for a job for which he was not qualified. What kind of a loser could summon up that kind of nerve? But Director Haller was not so certain. Yes, he had heard all of the reasons why he should not hire Al, but what he wanted to hear now were all of the reasons why he should. You know what? That interview continued for most of 2 hours, and by the time it was over, the director had come to this conclusion: Al was not stupid. He was simply a failure. If he were ever to stop failing and make something of himself, he would first require a large dose of self-confidence. So Director Haller decided to give Al a break, a probationary job as technical expert 3rd class. You see, though posterity's impression of Al is larger than life, he was not destined to guide lesser minds through space and time. In fact, at 22, he stood at the brink of utter obscurity. And then he got that job at the Swiss Federal Patent Office. And inspired by his very first unequivocal success, he eventually learned to live up to his best, his very best, and to become the groundbreaking genius the world now knows as Albert Einstein. Only now you know the rest of the story.
And with that, we're starting this lecture about storytelling. When you start communicating for a living, you're working what is called the story business. The purpose of storytelling is to entice the listener, to make the audience want to find out what happens next. It's not all that different from all of our childhood fairy tales. You know, those once upon a time in a far off land, there was a princess and a monster. Then one day, ... all those stories. We as human beings love stories. We learn through them from the time that we are children, and we continue the tradition as adults. Most people find it very hard to resist a good story. If well told, they make us laugh, they make us entertained, or they make us feel entertained. They teach us about life and, importantly, remind us about our humanity. Storytelling is one of the key points in the proven creating powerful radio or creating powerful communicators process. And that is focus, engage, opinion or position, and storytelling. There are those who are naturally powerful storytellers, and the art of powerful storytelling is a talent, okay? But any topic in the hand of a truly talented master storyteller can come alive and captivate the audience, but the craft of storytelling is a skill that can be taught. No matter what your level of talent, anyone can become a better storyteller. At the moment, we're sitting with a situation where the pace is accelerating. Because nearly everyone has access to media and technology, it's your well-honed ability to tell stories within the limits of your medium, whether that's radio or TV, podcasting, whatever it might be, that will allow you to get an audience and to keep that audience's attention. In an over-communicated world where media is democratized and mobile, and everyone can be a broadcaster at this point, literally everyone can, or a producer, or a publisher, or a director, or an actor, or even a storyteller. In a time when anyone from virtually anywhere can create and send pictures, words, moving images, and audio from anywhere else and to anyone else, one person or billions, good storytellers will rule. Because of the amount of communication tools that are available to us, audiences are overwhelmed. Think about yourself. You can't even take in a quarter of all the information that's out there for you on a day-to-day basis. There's so many choices: what to read, what to watch, what to listen to, what to comment on, what to interact with, etc. At the end of the day, though, it doesn't matter if it's a tweet, if it's a post, if it's a sales presentation. If it's not a good story, it won't get attention. Whether you work as a broadcaster or whether you're going to work as a broadcaster or any type of communicator, your job will likely involve powerful storytelling. So it's really important that you understand how to tell a powerful story. So the storytelling trainer and consultant Jeffrey Hedquist has this to say: everyone, whether parents, teachers, managers, journalists, salespeople, advertising and marketing executives, and entertainers, all use stories. We either do it haphazardly or with skill and effectiveness. You can use this inherent, powerful, tribal communication skill to your advantage to influence, motivate, educate, sell, and entertain your audience. We've gone through the basics of storytelling before, the who, what, where, when, why, how. We've looked at the beginning, the middle, and the end. But it's the way that you tell the story, using your own personality and tailoring it to your audience, that will make you a powerful storyteller. Audiences connect and respond to stories that reflect the basic themes of human nature. Good versus evil, right versus wrong, humor, love stories, the ridiculous, life is absurd. There's even a thing called theater of the absurd. It was one of my subjects when I studied, which was really big in the 1950s. Or even how individuals triumph over the odds. Okay, we all like the underdog to win. And then there's those David and Goliath stories or revenge stories. Those rags to riches or riches to rags stories. Stories that show character and are hopeful and teach, inspire, or move people, all work. Human beings love stories. We learn through them from the time that we are children, and we continue the tradition as adults. Most people find it very hard to resist a good story. If well told, they make us laugh, they entertain us, they teach us about life, and importantly, they remind us about our humanity. Long before the printed word, every culture on earth passed down its vital information, its ethics and morals, through storytelling, through myths and parables. Best-selling books, movies, television, and live entertainment are all based on great stories and great storytelling. So that's something that Valerie Geller said in Beyond Powerful Radio with regards to storytelling. It reminds us that we are all born to listen to stories. We all love a great story and are always drawn almost instinctively to those that have the ability to tell them superbly. Almost all great radio presenters have two definite things going for them. Firstly, they have an easy to understand, relatable, and emotive character map or profile. And secondly, they are great storytellers. Presenters need to work hard at perfecting all the practical examples provided, okay? If you are to become a great storyteller yourself. Emma Coates, who's a storyboard artist from Pixar, who worked on Disney movies like Brave, has written extensively about storytelling. She's named a series of principles that we're going to look at now from the perspective of writing and performing stories for radio. You admire a character more for trying than for their successes. From a radio perspective, this can be seen as twofold. So firstly, make your stories have a character that's trying to succeed. And secondly, presenters must make themselves as vulnerable as possible in front of their audience. Make listeners believe that you as a presenter are just like them, and they too are striving for the same successes and trying to avoid the same failures. There's 6 different ways in which you as a presenter can make yourself vulnerable. First and foremost, listening is the most important part of becoming vulnerable. Actively listen to listeners, clients, co-hosts, and managers while watching their body language and being open to non-verbal communications around you. We spoke about how important listening is 2 lectures ago as well, when we spoke about interviews and just how important it is to listen and to listen to what is not being said while taking in body language. So listening is the most important part of becoming vulnerable. Number 2, while you are on the air, if something fits your character profile and you're thinking it, then say it. Number 3, be intimate and personal by finding ways to share personal experiences with your listeners. Number 4, share your emotions. Tell your listeners how you are feeling about a topic, not only what you are thinking. Number 5, show vulnerability and show self-deprecation. Lastly, number 6, place the focus on your listeners. Ask them to share your experience by asking, you know when, or have you ever? Okay. So that's the first step. So if we look at Emma Coates' second principle, you have to keep in mind what is interesting to you as an audience, not what is fun to do as a writer. These two things can be very different. Always put the listener front and center of every radio conversation. Remember both the flow and interaction that we've previously spoken about. So when you are having a conversation with your co-host, then you are not talking to your presenter. So you need to talk to your presenter so that it can flow back, okay? Remember that flow and interaction. Also make sure that the content is relevant and relatable. And then number 3, trying for theme is important, but you won't see what the story is actually about until you're at the end of it. Now rewrite. What am I referring to there? Many radio presenters, because of the sheer volume of creative work that they have to churn out, become stuck on delivering only their first ideas. Write the story, then rewrite the story, making sure it becomes the best version of itself. So don't always settle for the first version. Number 4, once upon a time there was beep, there was X. Every day, X. Because of that, X. Because of that, X. Until finally, this is a fantastic template to use when writing a radio story specifically. Especially when it comes to personal stories that relate to a presenter's character on air. Start with the history of the story, then progress to how the event impacts on the presenter's everyday and how, because of this factor, there's a conflict or a dilemma. Lastly, tell the story of how it's finally resolved. Very important. Number 5, simplify, focus, combine characters. Hop over detours. You might feel like you are losing valuable stuff, but it sets you free. Okay, so in essence, keep the story simple, concise, and engaging. Number 6, what is your character good at or comfortable with? Whatever it is, throw the polar opposite at them. Challenge them. How do they deal? Every character in a story needs to be challenged. This is because a story needs conflict or dilemma. The obstacle does not always start out as being one, but it moves between a journey and the goal, a journey toward the goal. This can be done from safety to danger or from the known to the unknown. The challenge is what prevents the protagonist achieving its goal. It's the problem, the dilemma, or the question. It may be another person, something physical to be overcome, or something to be learned. Often it might be an internal challenge. This conflict makes the story worth telling, gives it drama, and makes the comedy work. Number 7, come up with your ending before you figure out your middle. Start with the payoff, because starting with the ending will shape your entire story. The reality is, if you don't know where you're going, you are more likely to wander around, making the story boring and unengaging. Number 8, finish your story. Let it go, even if it isn't perfect. As radio presenters, writers, and producers, you are continuously creating content, okay? You are always going to be busy finding new content pieces, creating new content pieces. Don't get stuck on a piece that wasn't perfect. You get better the more you write and the more you tell stories, okay? So give it time. Number 9, when you are stuck, make a list of what won't happen next. A lot of times, the material to help you get unstuck will show up this way around. This is a fantastic way of brainstorming the crumbs, which is the middle piece of the story. Number 10, pull apart stories that you like. What you like in them is a part of you. You've got to recognize it before you can use it. This will help you find yourself. This will also help you tell your truth, and doing so in a way that really matters to the audience. Number 11, putting it on paper allows you to start fixing it. If it stays in your head, a perfect idea, you will never share it with anyone. So the whole idea is that you need to take your thoughts and put it onto paper for you to be able to use it. Number 12, discount the first thing that comes to mind, and the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Get the obvious out of the way. Surprise yourself. This point is so important to radio presenters. It reiterates that great stories come from hard work. Many presenters present the first thing that comes to mind, okay? It's just one of those things. This is sheer laziness. Don't simply work on the first thing that you have. Rework that first story. Get a new angle to it, okay? Before bringing it back. Then number 13, give your characters opinions. Passive or malleable might seem likable to you as you write, but it's poison to the audience. Strong opposing opinions are gold on radio. Presenters should use these in storytelling whenever they can. Number 14, why must you tell this story? What is the belief burning within you that your story feeds off of? That is the heart of it. If the presenter or the storyteller, if you as the presenter or the storyteller has no emotional connection to the story, neither will your listener. Make sure that your story feeds off of the emotional connection, and make sure that it's told in a way that brings out that emotion. Number 15, if you were a character in this situation, how would you feel? Honesty lends credibility to unbelievable situations. So make your audience want to care, to feel something for your story. People are overloaded with way too much information as it is. If you evoke emotions, people will pay attention and remember the message that you want to convey for longer. Number 16, what are the stakes? Give us reason to root for your character. What happens if they don't succeed? Stack the odds against, okay? Stack the odds against them. This is also true for presenters' characters, not only for stories. If you as a presenter can get listeners on your side and can get listeners rooting for you, then you are creating emotional bonds that cause listeners to tune in and always try to be involved in your life as a presenter. As the old saying goes, no personal conflict, no story. Number 17, no work is ever wasted. If it's not working, let it go and move on. It will come back around to be useful later. So there's always another link, okay? Always another opportunity and another space to use content in radio. Number 18, you have to know yourself. The difference between doing your best and fussing. Story is testing, not refining. This again refers to presenters understanding themselves, okay, and their characters. So knowing yourself and knowing exactly what it is that you stand for. Number 19, coincidences to get characters into trouble are great. Coincidences to get them out of trouble are cheating. Don't be lazy when it comes to creating stories, okay? So don't write a coincidence to get your character out of trouble. Although brevity is important, loopholes in the story can be fateful and must be plugged. Number 20, exercise. Take the building blocks of a movie that you dislike. Number 20, okay, so this one is an exercise for you. Take the building blocks of a movie that you dislike. How can you rearrange them into what you do like, into something that would be a movie that you like. Presenters should do extra work on their craft. This is similar to a professional sportsman only playing games and never putting in the time on the practice field. Sportsmen know the importance of training and practicing. Radio people should learn to do the same. So this quote provides a great exercise for starting this process. Another exercise could be taking the building blocks of a radio show or link or a podcast that the presenter dislikes. Another exercise could be taking the building blocks of a radio show or a link or a podcast that you dislike and then rearranging them into what you think will make a great link or a great show. So that's another way of thinking about it. Number 21, you've got to identify with your situation or characters. You can't just write cool. What would make you act that way? The more authentic the story and the storyteller, the better the chance of succeeding. Number 22 there, what is the essence of your story? The most economical telling of it. If you want that, if you know that, you can build it out from there. Every great radio story is usually quite clear and concise. Listeners should be able to repeat the story and the ideas in the story almost word for word. We're going to listen to another one of Paul Harvey's stories, okay? And I want you to see what it is that you think really works in the story.
Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You know what the news is. In a minute, you're going to hear the rest of the story. The rest of the story. When the 19th century was young and Henry was only 8, the French invaded Germany. The boy's father and 3 older brothers joined the German army to defend their homeland. The rest of the family remained in Wolfshagen. And yet there and then, the battlefront and the home front often blurred. For after the men of the house had left to engage the French in some distant battle, the enemy overran and occupied Henry's hometown. He and his mother and young brothers and sisters had to flee into the mountains. And through that terrible cold winter, the civilian family slowly perished, some from exposure, others from starvation. By spring, the only one left was little Henry. Not long after the little boy wandered down from the frigid mountains, his father and 3 remaining brothers, home from soldiering, found him. When the war was over, Henry's father returned to his former employment as a forester in the lush woodlands of the Duke of Brunswick, and all 4 brothers worked at their father's side. And the father never stopped reminding Henry that his survival through that harsh winter in the mountains was very much a miracle, that his youngest son had been spared for some purpose, though he knew not what. This is the rest of the story. Now the year is 1812. Henry is 15. His 3 older brothers are laboring in the countryside with their father, and one minute the sky was blue, and the next there was a terrific clap of thunder. The foresters looked up to see black storm clouds looming on the horizon, rolling in fast. The father and 4 brothers and 2 other workers took refuge in a nearby shelter. Suddenly the rain's coming down in an opaque wall of water, and then a flash of light, and later, after the storm had passed, woodsmen discovered the smoldering rubble. The shelter had been incinerated by the lightning bolt. The bodies of the foresters who had huddled there lay lifeless in the ashes. The woodsmen counted 7, all of them dead. Or so they thought. But one of them only stunned had survived. And yes, that one was 15-year-old Henry. Henry is now utterly orphaned and utterly penniless. He would have to make his own way in the world. But no matter how hard the times got, he remembered what his father had told him, that his life had been spared for a purpose. And after all that had happened, who could deny it? For indeed, the boy one day became a man, and the man one day became a maker of musical instruments, one whose name is revered even unto this day.
You see, the essence of Henry's monumental accomplishments in life is the destiny attached to them. For once upon a time, there was a child who lost his entire family twice, and who was himself rescued from almost certain death twice, and who battled the odds to break new ground and set a new standard as a creator of the world's finest pianos. You would recognize Henry only by his last name, Steinway, the young forester who eventually taught the trees to sing. Now you know the rest of the story.
Harvey was a brilliant storyteller, and there are a lot of stories out there that you can go and listen to get more of a feel for what he did. He used news as content to weave personality into the homes of millions of American people multiple times each day. So he delivered current topical news and commentary with personality and perspective. His content was always on point for his personality profile, but it was his ability to tell stories that made him such a well-known and well-liked personality. Paul Harvey, on a daily basis, would skillfully weave stories together, transitioning from one to the next. He would express personality through his choice of words without getting in the way of content at all. You could feel his perspective through his delivery. He varied his pace to add drama. He used his voice as a weapon. He used benchmarks as hooks, okay? Because obviously we all know about how important it is to utilize those hooks. This is just one example of how important it is to utilize prep, to prep your stories, and to use the techniques and tips from this lesson within your stories to try and get the best out of them. So just lastly, quickly to recap, storytelling is one of the key points in the proven creating powerful radio or powerful communicators process. Focus, engage, opinion or position, and storytelling. Storytelling is used to entice the listener. It has been taught since childhood. We've all had stories since we were kids. There are no boring stories, only boring storytellers. The basics of storytelling is the who, the what, where, when, why, and how, along with the beginning, the middle, and the end. However, the way the story is told with personality and tailoring it to the audience is the key to being a powerful storyteller. Stories reflect the basic themes of human nature. So good versus evil, right versus wrong, humor, love, life's absurdities, triumph against all odds, rags to riches or riches to rags. And lastly, stories that succeed are about character, and they inspire, they give hope, teach, and move the members of the audience. And with that, we come to the end of this lecture, okay? Please do me a favor and go through the notes again. Go through the PowerPoint slides. Make sure you understand all of the elements, why they are so important to be utilized, what their functions are, okay? So that we can start building on your stories to start getting you to that point of providing the best stories possible. And with that, I say goodbye for now until our next lesson. Bye.